Hello and welcome back to Processing the Process, where we capture and discuss the technical, psychological, and contextual dynamics that shape the process of creating a work of art in both the performing arts and the business world. Week by week, we are following Anthony Mangone, owner of Trattoria 632 in Purchase, New York, as he navigates the internal struggles and external circumstances that impact the development of his restaurant business. Last week, we learned more about the life of a sole proprietor. We then received a real education in restaurant business operations as Anthony took us through a typical 24-hour period at the restaurant. This week, we'll learn how Anthony handled some specific external challenges, and we'll take you chronologically through the ultimate external challenge, the COVID pandemic. Anthony, we know that you continually confront challenges that require you to make decisions quickly, to anticipate the repercussions of those decisions, and to pivot on a dime in response to unexpected situations. So can you tell us about a couple of specific examples that you encountered and how you handled them?
Well, it almost feels like sometimes on a daily occasion we deal with unforeseen circumstances.
Yes.
But we've dealt with everything, the run of the gamut. I think back to one particular circumstance, not this particular Christmas, but last Christmas season, holiday season. There was a faint smell of gas in the restaurant, and no one could understand where it was coming from, and I realized where it was coming from. It meant that we were running out of propane, and we normally get a delivery every week of propane. That particular week, for whatever reason, I believe there might have been a snowstorm, and our normal delivery date was missed, and as a result, there was no propane. And you could just imagine, knowing that that particular evening you were going to have a full restaurant, and if you don't have gas, that usually presents a problem. You certainly couldn't start a bonfire and start cooking. So that was something that I recall. I also recall another evening where we were having an engagement party, and there was a water main break outside, and it was a Friday evening, and it happened at about 3:30 in the afternoon. And to get a crew from Westchester Joint Waterworks out on a Friday afternoon to come and fix a water main break is usually next to impossible. But you start to think on your feet, and you start going through your Rolodex, figuring out who to call. In the instance with the gas, fortunately, the owner of the gas company is a frequent customer here. I immediately called him. He had an emergency truck come and deliver gas immediately. Westchester Joint Waterworks, we were able to call in some local elected officials who were able to make some calls for us. They got someone here, and they stayed. They stayed that evening until it was fixed and we had water. But normally with a water main break, you're done. You're closed for the evening because you have to shut everything down. And all I could think about that evening was telling this young lady who had spent so much time on this engagement party, telling her, yeah, we can't service you tonight because we had a water main break. So those are the type of unforeseen circumstances that may arise that you just need to figure it out quickly. And we've been fortunate in that respect that each person here, has, competencies where they know how to try to resolve it, or in the alternative, they come to me, like in these particular instances, and we were able to resolve it. But it's sometimes not easy, obviously, and it causes an undue amount of stress.
Oh, of course. And it sounds like in these two examples that you just shared with us that your political experience was paramount because you had a Rolodex of contacts from that time,
Absolutely.
right?
And you're able to figure out, know who to call immediately, and figure out once the guys get here and they're here, explain to them the exigency of the circumstances that you need to really get something done because you need to be open for Friday dinner service, and sometimes it requires you to, I think on that particular evening, as soon as the guys arrived, I had guys, making, wedges and pizza, and we were bringing out pizza for everybody, and you start to do those type of things just to show the guys your appreciation that, look, whatever you guys need, hot coffee, we just need to get open. And fortunately, the work crew that was here that evening understood that, and they got us open. I think we had running water by about 6:30 that night. Even 6:30 is a problem, though, right?
Right.
Yeah.
When your first calls, I believe, come in 4:45.
That's correct.
For takeout.
Yeah, so those are the ones that stick out. Like there's many others in terms of, we've had storms with Con Edison, but it's being able to, when you're a small business owner, particularly here, you become the chief, the cook, and the bottle washer. You have to think on your feet, and the burdens falls on your shoulders. You just have to figure it out, and that's what I was able to accomplish.
What do you do here? Like one example I thought was very interesting, that you had told me that you had really figured out Mondays, the rhythms, the staffing required, and so forth. And one particular Monday, I believe, there was one reservation in the book, and you were slammed with, overwhelmed with people, and it was completely unexpected.
It was particularly unexpected. When we were going through the pandemic, obviously there had to be changes in scheduling. You couldn't just put on your regular amount of staff because it was unnecessary. And there has to be a point in which you juggle the equities in terms of making sure that you have enough resources to keep the business going, and making sure that you have your staff in place where they're able to feed their families as well. This was a day in which, I think I used the term last week, we got caught flat-footed. We didn't anticipate, we had one reservation in the book on this particular Monday, and the restaurant just completely filled up. For whatever reasons, there was an inordinate amount of takeout and deliveries at the same time. And again, an unforeseen challenge. And when you get hit with those types of experiences, the first immediate gut reaction when this happened, I think this was back in May, was for the rest of my team to say, we need to hire more staff.
Right.
And those type of gut reactions are not particularly helpful, because if you react in a shotgun approach to resolving matters, it usually will result in anarchy and confusion and cost prohibitive.
Right.
So what I explained to the team was, look, I don't want anyone to become overwhelmed, certainly, and you have to do more than could ever be expected of you. But let's determine if a pattern is developing and people are becoming more and more comfortable with going out and starting to come back in to restaurants. Mm-hmm. This is back in the early middle of the spring in May, where the count of the virus had started to go down.
Yes.
The spike had gone down a lot, and at the same time there were more vaccinations. There were reports that they were going to be lifting the mandates on masks. So I think people started to become more comfortable. It was a nice day for weather, and we got bombarded. We couldn't anticipate it. But the answer is not to immediately hire people. I said, let's see if a pattern is developing, and if a pattern is developing, we will certainly bring in additional personnel.
Exactly. Now, and that's again in sync with what you have shared with us about your very careful, consistent study of trends, and I believe you said behavioral economics, and that they tend to be pretty steady in this area. So these kinds of events are particularly feeling like they're out of the blue in a way.
I'm a big believer, and I know we've shared that before with each other, in behavioral economics for the various different businesses. And we have been blessed to know that there are certain patterns that develop here. The pandemic situation was hopefully a once-in-a-lifetime situation. Unforeseeable patterns in behavioral economics, because there are divisions in this country, in this community, in terms of what people feel safe, what people don't feel safe, what makes them comfortable, what doesn't make them comfortable. And you're really learning it on the go, right? It's not something that you're able to pick up a pamphlet and say, this is going to be the answer to resolve all these issues.
Right.
You know, and that's something that, again, is unforeseeable, and like I said, hopefully the once-in-a-lifetime situation that we'll be dealing with this.
And we will be getting into this very shortly in much greater depth.
Absolutely.
Of course. One instance I thought was very interesting, and I really didn't realize the impact on a Saturday night in April when you told me that it was total anarchy, and you found out that a line cook in the kitchen was missing.
Yeah.
And I found it amazing how that the absence of this one individual had these repercussions that threw everything off.
Yeah.
So how did you handle that?
So
and explain what happened.
So we it was a busy Saturday evening in April, and you know, I tend to walk around a lot, and
Yes.
going back and forth into the kitchen, bringing out delivery orders, maybe stopping by a table. And at one point I said, why is everything so backed up? And I noticed one of our line cooks was not there, but I just immediately thought maybe he had to go to the restroom for a moment,
Sure.
downstairs, maybe getting some produce. Didn't know what the issue was. About 10 minutes later, I noticed he still wasn't around, and I said, where did this guy go? And I found out about 20 minutes later, he had stepped out. He didn't want to burden me and let me know that they forgot that they didn't have salmon. He went to the supermarket to buy salmon, to come back so that they could fulfill the rest of the evening's orders.
Right.
And while I appreciated his initiative, afterwards I explained to him that, you know, it's much easier for me, burden me with that problem, let me make that decision, because it's much easier for me to extract myself at that particular moment and go and get salmon for you, rather than you walk away and cause complete anarchy
Wow.
for the rest of the evening. Because what winds up happening when he's not there and his station becomes overwhelmed, tables get backed up, tickets get backed up, deliveries get backed up, and then it becomes a trickle-down effect.
That's right.
And then instead of having me go out, get that issue, we've now potentially caused an enormous amount of bad will as opposed to goodwill that we're always trying to build up.
Exactly.
So, and as I explained last week, it's an unforgiving business, and someone has a late delivery that evening, had company coming over. Those are all things that people will remember. You cannot explain to them that the line cook went out to go get salmon and that's what caused that. So
Oh my gosh.
again, I appreciated the initiative, but I just knew that it was just he had to understand from my perspective, when he removes himself, that's going to cause a lot more damage than anything else.
Absolutely. Now, what happens when unexpectedly large catering orders come in? And you've established this, what you thought was this really good balance of juggling all the balls for that particular day, and all of a sudden you get a huge catering order.
It happens particularly now. In the last 6 weeks, we've noticed as a result of the different corporations reopening. We always hope that we're going to get big catering orders.
Right.
And in most instances, in many instances, the companies or the customer will call the day before and say, this is what I need for tomorrow and I need it by this time. Again, not everybody is going to schedule their event to your liking and to your preparation,
Oh my God.
and it just happens. So we got a call. It was Pepsi had a very large pizza and catering order. They had, I guess, they were a group of workers there that were renovating so that when the employees came back in, it was proper social distancing. They put in a very large order. We had another order over at Ross Aviation, which is a private hangar here at the Westchester County Airport, for a group of gentlemen who were flying on a private jet. And their particular order, I believe, had 8 roasted chickens on it. And now all of a sudden you have a kitchen that is in complete disarray. They were not anticipating it, and they now have to work under extraordinary duress. More importantly, because it's not anticipated, you're not maybe stocked properly. You didn't anticipate these large trays of catering for, I think it was about 80 people that called us and they said they needed it, in an hour. And those are the type of things that happen, and I always feel terrible for my team because they sit there and they're otherwise prepared, but they couldn't anticipate this.
Exactly, and you don't want to turn down business.
Especially this time, yeah. Especially
so
this
it's
time.
really a
So
conundrum.
it is, and it's and you want to make sure that you do your best to service that customer. And with respect to the Ross Aviation situation, we have on our menu roasted chicken. It's not one of our more popular items, so we don't, and because it's a perishable item, we don't keep tons of stock of this airline chicken breast. That wiped us out. So that was done. We've done for that product for the rest of the day until we were able to source it the next day. So those are the type of things that are unforeseeable. I'm fortunate that I have a team that's able to think on its feet and work and be able to thrive under that type of chaos.
Wow. Well, then those competencies and ways of operating were put to the ultimate test, needless to say, as you dealt with the ultimate external challenge of the pandemic.
Yeah.
So let's examine your internal experiences and external circumstances as they unfolded over the course of the pandemic. But first I wanted to ask you if, and maybe this sounds like a crazy question because people would say, well, of course, was this the toughest external challenge you've had to face in this business?
I would say certainly difficult, but probably not the most difficult. I would say when I released my 2 partners and was now in full control of this business, a business that I had never run before, that to me was a much more daunting challenge and concerned me because of the unknown of how do I deal with all of these different moving parts. I'm not a pizza maker by trade. I'm not a chef by trade. I certainly never had to deal with scheduling of servers. Never had to deal with ordering of all this product. And to me, that was a much more daunting challenge, knowing that I would, and being able to bring in the right people. Who am I to judge who the right person is, right? When I didn't have a lot of experience with this. And so, you had to kiss some frogs before you got to the prince, so to speak. So I was able to deal with a lot of these different circumstances and then also get rid of all of the prior employees who just did not sign on to our theory here. That to me was a much more challenging experience than the pandemic itself.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, now we'll test Anthony with the pandemic.
Yeah.
Actually, let's start with a period from February 2020 to spring 2020, when you were in Florida in February.
Yeah,
Yes,
we travel, each year to the South Florida area for President's Week, and I remember obviously we started to hear a lot of news regarding the possibility of COVID coming to the States. I think by that particular time there might have been the first case out of New Rochelle,
Right.
and I recall calling to the restaurant, and I have access to the numbers as the evening is going on. So I will be able to see from my phone how many customers are there, how many meals we've processed, how many tickets we've processed, and certainly the revenue for the evening.
Right.
And I think I've said in the past, it's a very cyclical business. I could go to a calendar and tell you within a few dollars what we're going to do on a particular evening, because it's, again, behavioral economics. People tend to statistically go to the same types on evenings. They tend to go out. They tend to spend a certain amount of money. So I know where it's going to be, and I saw the numbers were dramatically down. And certainly when I'm going away on vacation, I can anticipate what we're going to do for that week. And I saw it, and I said, the numbers don't seem right. And I called, and when I had spoken to some of the team here, they had said, people are just nervous. It's just no one was here. It was just a different aura in the restaurant too. It would seem like there was people on heightened awareness, because again, they didn't know what this COVID was. And so I immediately told them, well, look, I think one thing we should do is we want to permeate a message that everyone, that we're safe, that we're healthy. Have the servers wear gloves, and those type of little things to make people feel that the workers are safe and everyone's good. It just wasn't. It was such an unknown that people didn't know what was the right way to handle it.
Of course.
And so there was nothing we were going to be able to do to reduce that fear factor of the unknown. And we're still dealing with it. But at that particular time, it was clearly unknown. Nobody knew anything. And so now we get to March 16th, and the governor.
Oh, may I just interrupt
Yes.
you? Because I thought it was really interesting that you had told me when you came back from your vacation, you have a customer who is a physician.
Yes.
And you had a very interesting conversation.
And I remember it like it was yesterday, and he had said to me, I sat with him and I said, so what do you think of this? And he said to me, it's bad. He says, they're probably going to have to shut the country down for 2 weeks. And I looked at his wine glass and I said, maybe he had too much wine for the evening. And I said, there's no way they're going to close the country down for 2 weeks. No, again, never anticipating what this wave would be. And then sure enough, a couple of weeks later, we got shut down. And I remembered his thought process on it. And so I said, okay, it's going to be 2 weeks. Thinking in my mind, this is exactly what he had told me, and was probably the right way to do it, and it would be 2 weeks. And we were given strict mandates as to how we would be able to operate. We would only be able to operate with delivery and takeout. It was a very unsettling feeling, because I knew that there were employees that I would have to let go. I think we let go 5 employees. I had to modify the rest of the schedule of the people that were here, and it was a very sick feeling, because you don't know how you're going to deal with this, and you're hoping that it's only going to be a couple of weeks. But I think at that particular moment, the news had been much more direct in terms of how many cases were actually surging and coming on,
Right.
and the hospitalization rate had been through the roof. and it continued to only worsen. So that was a very sickening feeling, but I knew there was nothing that we could do. You know, we like to look forward and be able to anticipate how to handle certain circumstances. This was something that was not on our dime. We didn't cause it. We had to figure out a way to survive. You know, I've survived a lot of different problems in my life. I have a lot of calluses on my hands, so I know how to deal with problems, and this was one that I knew you just got to get through this. You just have to migrate your way through this, hoping that it would last. You know, my original thought was, we're going to be in this till, well, let me circle back for a moment. I specifically recall that Trump was on the news, and he said, well, maybe we'll be open for, I think it would be great if we could be open the country for Easter. And I remember listening to him, and I'm saying, I don't know what this guy's thinking. There's no way we're going to be open by Easter. The rates here in New York were astronomical. The hospitalization rates were astronomical. And the initial discussions were that we needed to be shut down until we could reduce the hospitalization rate. And that wasn't happening. So there was no way we were going to be open. And I said, probably June, you know, thinking June, this will be resolved, the end of June, everything will be back to normal. And clearly that didn't happen either. So it was, but those first 6 or 8 weeks were again, they were daunting, but I knew there was nothing that we did wrong, and I knew that what we would have to do is shift gears and go to one of our strengths. We do a lot of delivery and takeout here. So we're gonna sit there and focus on what we do every day here. Remember, there were a lot of restaurants that were not ready for takeout and delivery.
Sure.
It is another part of the business. It's, again, packaging and making sure you have the right packaging and making sure the food gets there correctly, making sure that you have, you know, a team in place to deliver, right?
And even then, a captain
who can migrate all that. And you know, I just remember those first weeks of doing delivery, and I remember again, we created a new cycle, and now it was, you know, we would do a certain amount of business on Mondays, a certain amount of business on Tuesdays, and so you started to see where your deliveries were coming from and what would happen. Well, by Friday, people wanted to treat their weekends like it was their weekends, and our delivery orders would spike exponentially on the weekends. And I remember there was one particular Friday where the tickets were all lined up, and it was just unbelievable. And I said, we're not built for this amount of volume, just because there's only so much room you could put plates and bags and people don't. Again, that when you're delivering to someone's home, they don't know what you're dealing with as far as space availability. And you can only answer the phone. You know, people calling in order. You know, we have 4 phone lines, and you know, you don't know how many calls are going to happen that evening, so you don't want to have 5 people answering phones that you're paying, right? So that one particular night, I recall the phone just kept ringing and ringing and ringing, and you can't. There's nothing you can do about it. The following week, we made sure we had that resolved, but those were, again, unanticipated new patterns that we had to think on our feet. Fortunately, you know, going back to our core training, it wasn't that I had to go out and hire new people to answer phones. All of the people that work here were trained on how to take orders over the phone.
Absolutely.
And I know it, for some people that may be at home, they may be sitting there saying, well, how hard could it be to take an order over the phone? It is difficult because people are undecided as to what they want. They're asking you questions, what's in that product, you know, making modifications to it while you're speaking on a phone and trying to type it into a computer at the same time. And other phones are ringing. And so just imagine that chaos.
Exactly.
And then you had people who did not want to come in and pick up their items. They wanted you to bring it out to their car. So again, because we were built to do a lot of takeout and delivery, and because all of the people that we kept on, servers, knew how to answer the phone and how to take an order, it made our job, I believe, a lot easier than other restaurants who just, they weren't accustomed to it.
Absolutely. I mean, it ironically, it spoke to your strengths, and you were able to
Absolutely.
Draw upon them to do as best as you could do under the circumstances.
Under the circumstances, to make it seem like we'd try to make it as normal as possible.
Exactly. Now, how were you affected by supply chain disruptions?
We're still dealing with it. We're still dealing with it. But at that particular moment, particular time, a lot of purveyors shut down. So they were not available. There were a lack of truck drivers, if you recall. So a lot of different product was not available. Nothing was coming out of Europe. So, whatever we sourced as far as imported products were not available. I think till this day, it's almost nearly impossible to get speck, which is a cured ham that we have in some of our products. It's almost impossible to get, and at that particular time was not available. So I would go to the market, every day in terms of the Restaurant Depot, and it looked like Armageddon.
Oh God.
The shelves were completely empty, and you now have to sit there and again retrain and recalibrate as to how you're going to stock your inventory. And maybe instead of buying 2 cases of lettuce, you're buying only 3 bags of lettuce because
Wow.
you have to now juggle what kind of business are you going to be doing. Okay, I'll buy more on the weekend because certainly we see that the spike in delivery on the weekend, but during the week we don't want these perishable items to go bad. And remember, we're dealing with a limited source of revenue as well. So you have to sit there and you have to manage. You have to manage. And it was, fortunately, I've been through some tough situations in life where you got to, manage, and I was able to do that. I was able to do that, a lot of that also funding out of my own pocket, because I knew that the end game was much more important, knowing that we would get through this at some point, and it was much more important to look long term and reinvest in my business. I looked at it as a reinvestment in my business, not, oh my God, we have to take money out of our own pockets to fund the business. No, it was a reinvestment into our business, knowing that at some point this was going to end and will end at some point, and we needed to keep our customers happy. And in order to do that, we had to make sure the product was right, that we were using the best product. It'd be very easy during that particular time period to cut corners. We didn't do that. We wanted to make sure we were still delivering the highest quality. We wanted to make sure that on the weekends we were using electronic media, Instagram, our email list, to send out to our customer base all the different specials we were making for the weekend. And sending pictures of everything and letting people know, yeah, we're still here. And that favorite special that you guys usually enjoy from us in the spring, we're still preparing it. And I remember there was one particular Thursday evening that we didn't send out the email. For whatever reason, I didn't have it prepared. And I remember a customer called and said, are they going to send out the specials? We look forward to knowing what you guys are going to have. We're looking forward to see what your mother baked for the weekend. And so it was, that's a good feeling because it means that the message is working, right?
That's right.
So,
that's right.
But being able to deal with those issues at that particular time was a new challenge. It was a new challenge in terms of having, and looking back, there were some evenings that it was such an accomplishment at the end to finally get through all the deliveries, and you look back on it almost with some nostalgia that we were able to get that done, and now we're back here today, and the restaurant is doing well, and customers are back in. But fighting through those tough times, I think, built a lot of character and a lot of camaraderie with the team that I have here. I think that only strengthen the camaraderie amongst them.
I had a question, though, with regard to the high quality product that you demand and have always served. How did you maintain that if supplies were disrupted and it wasn't available? What did you
We had
do?
to find it, and we had to physically look for it, call up, made a lot of different phone calls. You know, we have one particular purveyor who generally only deals with large supermarkets and specialty markets. Because I've been with them for so many years, they service me and maybe only a handful of other restaurants. And I remember him telling me that they were getting so many phone calls from customers who wanted to buy from them for the first time, and they said, look, when this is over, we'll consider servicing you, but we have to service our customers who have been loyal to us. And you know, a lot of times we couldn't source a product on a particular evening, but we wanted to make sure that we delivered this as the same product, and so I would not put an inferior product to replace it.
Okay.
Only because I
Right.
didn't want to potentially turn off a customer.
That's right.
Again, it's all goes back to our goal is to maintain customers and make sure that we're not going to lose anybody based on not providing them with what our normal course of conduct is.
Well, so now it's May 2020, the weather has improved, and the government has approved outdoor seating.
Yes.
How did you prepare for that, and what were the implications for your
Well,
business?
my recollection was that they gave us. They said, you know, you'll be able to do out. If I remember this correctly, they believe the governor had come out on a Wednesday and said, beginning Monday, restaurants will be able to have outdoor seating. And you sit there, that's great, we're going to get outdoor seating. What do we do? So I have two patios outside that seat, I believe, we got 4 on one side, 3. We probably have a total of 16 and 16. We probably have about 32 seats that were available in our front patio.
Okay.
And I said, well, what do we do to increase the volume? And so we looked at our parking lot, which is vast, and we said, let's make a patio. And so we brought a team in. Again, it was definitely costly at that particular time. If you recall, and it was still a problem up until about a few months ago, all the sawmills had closed. And everybody was doing a home improvement project because they were sitting home. So we had to go out, we had to buy lumber and build a patio, and the cost was, it was crazy.
Right.
And a lot of it wasn't available either. So, you know, I brought in a team, we got all the product, we started to build it on a Saturday, it was completed by Sunday, and now I think I seat another 32 in the back. So
You doubled your capacity.
correct, but again, it was, we knew we needed more seating, and we had to look at what was available in terms of our own real estate, right? We talked about bandwidth last week.
Yeah.
How do we increase our bandwidth? And
Right.
we did that by building a makeshift patio. Tried to make it look as appealing as we possibly could, brought in planters and the like, and have a back patio now for additional seating.
And lo and behold, now we're inching into the summer, and what's happening?
So sometime in the summer, there was a decision that was made, again, by the governor, allowing for capacity outside and capacity inside as well, but I think you were only allowed to do, I think, 50% capacity at that particular time. So you had to take tables out. You had to make sure the tables were properly distanced. And there were some other restrictions, of course. And now all of a sudden, you're seating people outside, you're starting to see people inside, and your business is starting to increase. And I remember our August was like a December. It was like a December month in terms of sales and revenue.
Wow.
And you started to say, well, again, I go back to my team, which maybe doesn't have the same foresight. They all said, well, we got to start hiring people and bring in more servers. And I said to them, wait one moment. And I have the same feeling right now as well.
Ah.
Let's be careful with hiring people. One, we've got to make sure our costs are in line. Two, you don't want to have to let people go. When the weather gets cold, there's only so much we can keep people warm with the heater outside. They're not going to come out anymore. So the darker days are coming, just so you understand. This is not going to get better immediately. And I think even to this day, there are certain people that are comfortable sitting outside. When the cold weather comes, they may not be ready to come inside yet.
Absolutely.
And that's, again, you're dealing with a person's mindset that you can't control. So I knew that there were darker days coming for us, and they certainly got darker. They certainly got darker, the late fall through winter, obviously.
And in order for you to have that in between time where people were still sitting outside, but it was a little bit cooler, you needed to have heaters, and that actually turned out to be a very big challenge.
Yeah, well, every restaurant owner now says to themselves, we got to be able to maintain our business. We're going to need heaters. So again, it becomes a supply chain issue. Manufacturers could not have anticipated that they were going to need to be making all these outdoor heaters. So we start calling around. There are no heaters anywhere. Again, fortunately, we have a relationship with our propane gas company. We called the president, and he was able to find us 6 heaters. 6 heaters was, at that particular time, like manna from heaven, because you were able to say, all right, at least we have outdoor heated area.
Yes.
But those heaters are only going to work and so much. And when the weather starts to drop, you could have 5 heaters around you and you're still not going to feel comfortable. So, but we were able to get those 6, and we're able to, I think, have outdoor seating, where it was comfortable enough for people through almost to the end of November.
Wow.
Maybe mid-November. But again, it was still more than, it was better than I anticipated based on the weather. But, now you're taking a portion of the public that was normally coming to your restaurant, and sitting outside. You've now taken them out of the game. They're not coming anymore. So as November kept going, the numbers started to plummet, and I knew it was coming. I saw it, and I said, the cold weather is going to, there was a huge spike, obviously, in the numbers last fall and winter. That certainly didn't help matters. And you were dealing with a segment of the population that only was comfortable sitting outside. And so you lost that customer base.
That's right. And also, I recall you said running these heaters is very costly.
Every heat lamp runs about $25 a night.
Right.
It's not a cost you could pass on to a consumer. It isn't. You do it to maintain customers, try to maintain some cash flow. But a lot of restaurants were already working on a shoestring budget, and now you tell them you have to provide heated seating, and it's at a cost of about $25 a night for each heater. If you have 6 heaters, do the math. That's an unanticipated cost, and the return on investment is not really there. It's more as an accommodation. And again, something that a consumer is not going to recognize or understand.
Of course.
It's just not, they're just not going to be able to do it. Some costs, you had some restaurant owners who were going to institute COVID fees.
Yes.
And I remember seeing that, and it turned off one particular restaurant, I won't name it, but they decided they were going to add a $25 surcharge per person for COVID. And I said, it's obnoxious. It's to sit there and one, certainly people have empathy for the restaurant industry, for a lot of the suffering that happened to them, but everybody suffered. And for you to sit there and think that you're going to be able to pass that cost on to somebody and believe that that empathy is going to translate into them saying, yeah, let's just take advantage of me and yeah, I'm going to help fund you, I just think was the wrong message to send to the customer base. And so I certainly didn't participate in anything close to that. I wouldn't even think of it. In fact, to the contrary, I went out and made sure that we did things to make people feel safe. We brought in medical grade air purifiers and things of that nature. You wanted people to come in and feel safe. You didn't want to sit there and gouge them and say that we're going to charge a surcharge on it.
Well, but speaking of finances, can you tell us about the government assistance programs, what you were and were not able to take advantage of, and what it was like to sit with that uncertainty?
So the government had the payroll protection program with the PPP loans, and they gave you the first round was 2.5 times your monthly payroll, and the forms were arduous to get through. They were not easy. A lot of times people, if they didn't use a payroll company and they had to sit there and recalculate their payroll, it wasn't easy. The forms asked certain questions that if you're not accustomed to filling out these types of applications, it made it difficult. And just remember for that particular time, it wasn't that people were able to say, well, I'll just go see my accountant or go and see my lawyer and they'll help me fill out this form. Probably a lot of these people couldn't get to those offices because they weren't available. The offices were closed. I have a background, in terms of having dealt with this type of work before. For me, it was simple. I was able to put the documentation together, submit it, but unfortunately, the way the program had been set up, I was submitted, I think, literally the first hours I was submitted.
Right.
And I said, okay, we anticipate this money will be coming in a short period of time. And lo and behold, we find out that a lot of big companies came in and ate up all of the available funding that was available. And I remember receiving a message from Chase saying that there's no more money available for PPP, and we hope that the government will replenish these amounts, but we're not going to be able to act on your PPP application.
Oh man.
And so again, discouraging. You sit there and you could be upset about it, but that Friday comes quickly every week, and that's when payroll is due. And so you could be real upset about it, but to sit there again and not be able to compartmentalize problems, some people would get stuck on that and find themselves, in a downward spiral. You sit there and you say, we'll figure it out. And so my hat goes off to all of the small businesses that were able to migrate through that particular period of time, because I don't think the PPP was funded again until about another 5 or 6 weeks later, where then the applications were put in, and certainly we received a first and a second round of PPP funding. But when you look back, my hat goes off to a lot of these people who were in those same circumstances and had to figure it out, whether it meant that they had to fund it out of their own pocket or just go on a shoestring budget.
Well, here you are then, December 2020, middle of December 2020, and I know you were looking, of course, at revenue versus year before, and seeing revenue as well as, of course, customers. With whatever you're comfortable sharing, absolute numbers or percentages, can you give us a sense of the toll
Oh, it was
this took
devastating.
by that town?
I think
by that time?
I think by the time December 20 came around, we had lost close to 800,000 in revenue. So it was, again, most people, you tell them you're going to lose 800,000 in revenue, you're out of business. It's done. I mean, just
Yeah.
it's just a matter of time. So you have to make that money up, and as much as the application, the government funding might have helped, it certainly didn't replace lost profits. So you know, as I had the same conversation with another restaurant owner, he had a meeting with his staff, and he told them, you know, you're upset that you're not making as much, I understand. Just imagine this though, just imagine going to work every day. I know I'm going to work every day and knowing that I'm making nothing. I'm only either laying money out or losing money. And just imagine that feeling. And you know, again, nobody wants to hear that side of it. Nobody wants to hear your tale of woe. But he felt, I guess it was important to let his team know that we didn't want to do that here. You know, our approach was, we'll figure it out. Yeah, it's not a great time, but keep, you know, the train moving, so to speak.
You know, it was striking to me because when you said that August was even better than December, when December is your big month, with
Yes.
holiday parties and
Yes.
special occasions, and of course Christmas.
Yes.
So I don't recall what December usually represents percentage-wise in the whole year, but that's a huge hit.
Well, I will tell you this. Look, you know, the restaurant industry it's very hard to open up a restaurant and survive. The failure rate is dramatic. December is usually the lifeline for most restaurants that are on the cusp of surviving or not. So for us, it's always, I think December and May are usually our top revenue percentage months because of, you know, Mother's Day and different events that happen, graduation parties in May. So those are usually the top months. This year was 2020 was a complete and utter disaster. It was sort of like, you know, the first week of July when everybody's on vacation, it's those type of numbers. And there were no holiday parties, there were no corporations in the area that were at work. All the offices were closed. There were no family reunions. There was some catering, but the weather was horrendous. Again, weather always plays a factor, but that's usually a one-day play. But add that on top of the circumstances, and you realize, you know, how difficult it was. And thinking about one particular instance in December, we had a customer who wanted to have his company holiday party at the restaurant, but he wanted the restaurant to himself so that it could be properly social distanced. And we were great. It was great. We were going to have a holiday party, and it's going to be a good day revenue-wise. We'll shut down, no problem. The customer had no problem with the increased cost of what it would be because we were shutting down. We had a major snowstorm.
You can't make this up.
Yeah.
You just can't.
No, you can't. Sometimes you sit there, you say, if I was in the hat business, people would be born with no heads, but you know, you just don't know. And so
oh my God.
so we had to shut down on that particular day. So it was like whatever could go wrong went wrong,
Yes.
but you just got to deal with it.
Well, then, speaking of which, as you look back retrospectively, what do you think felt the most psychologically challenging to you? What were you personally going
Oh, it was, you feel just a tremendous amount of frustration and anxiety of not knowing when this is going to get back to normal, and did we permanently lose our base? It's just, in as much as you know that it's probably not accurate, sometimes the mind plays tricks on you, and you put yourself in the position like it'll never get back to normal. And so you deal with that, but again, what is necessary is we have to come in and portray as if we're going to get back to normal. You don't want to sit there and send out a message to the people that are here and working with you through this time to let them feel that I'm in doubt as to where we're going to be.
Right.
Because you don't want to pass that fear along to them, and maybe they decide, well, it's too much for me, I'm going to leave. Because you know at some point you're going to need everybody back on board, because this eventually will end, but clearly a lot of self-doubt whether or not we were going to make it, because at some point you say to yourself, it becomes a law of diminishing returns. You're coming every day and you're coming out of pocket every day, and how much longer is this going to last? Are these restrictions ever going to be lifted? Is there going to be a positive enough message where people feel comfortable socializing again? And so,
Right.
those are the doubts that you carry, that I was carrying at that particular time.
I remember in our conversations then, something that you repeated a great deal is you were trying to get your head around how can we deal with the consumer mindset? Will we ever be able to overcome that fear, that reluctance? Will that way of thinking ever change? Are we doomed essentially as a result? And you couldn't figure it.
Couldn't figure it out, and again, having gone through some pretty difficult circumstances, this was one that I just couldn't figure. I couldn't figure out the game plan, the end game. I went to prison, but there was an end game. I knew that there was going to be a time when that period of my life was going to end. Certainly that carried its own anxieties, but I knew there was light at the end of the tunnel. From day one that I walked in, I knew that there was light at the end of the tunnel. This here, that particular time, more importantly, there was no light. There was just constant, it was being politicized, certainly to a certain degree. The cases were going up. It seems like the restrictions were worsening. And so as a business owner, you sit there and you say to yourself, certainly out of my control, right?
Well, that's what I was going to say. Out of your control. You are so used to being
in control,
right?
Correct. And knowing what I need to do to keep people coming here. Now I'm dealing with an unknown, a variable that is out of our control. It's a pandemic, and we're dealing with restrictions that are out of our control. Simply cannot overcome that. There is no game plan that you can do that's going to overcome restrictions that preclude people from coming through the door, or restrictions that will subside someone's fears of coming through the door. And so when you're dealing with a variable like that, it causes an enormous amount of anxiety, an enormous amount. But you have to play it off that, everything is cool.
And also, you had the uncertainty. I'm not 100% clear on my timeline here, but with the second round of PPP, because of what was going on politically, I think there was uncertainty as to
There was
what you were going to get, or
there
if
was
you-
well there was at that particular time, it was going to be added as a budget item, and they didn't know when they were going to do it, if they were going to wait for the new Congress to come in, which had been newly elected, or were they going to do it before time. And I think they did in fact wait till the new Congress came in, and then every day, you're reading as to whether or not they were going to put this funding available immediately for the second round. Ultimately, they did put the second round of PPP available. At that time, they allowed for a 3.5 times payroll formula,
Right.
Which allowed us to get additional funding. But they never put forth a program that replaced the lost profits for the owners. So it was great to keep all the employees in place, but they didn't do anything to replenish what the owners had lost. They did come out with another program. It was known as the Restaurant Revitalization Fund, and that gave us some hope and light at the end of the tunnel, saying this is great. They have this
That
program.
was much later.
Yeah, that was this past spring,
Right.
and lo and behold, they underfunded the program. There were certain availability of monies to certain groups. There was a lawsuit put in place. The program shut down.
Right. Right.
So, again, that was something that we had anticipated, saying that's going to be a great shot in the arm, and maybe be able to pull back some of the money that we had laid out. But that program stalled. There are talks that they will be replenishing that program. But as a small business owner, you can't sit there and hope
Right.
on a government-funded program. It's not a good formula for success. So, and my heart breaks for a lot of these different restaurants who are sitting there hoping and praying that they're going to get this new round of funding. I at first was hopeful that they were going to replenish it, but as the time goes by and things start to normalize, I don't think there's going to be the same amount of urgency to replace that. And so and there are a ton of celebrity chefs that are lobbying Congress to try and get this money replenished. And I don't think it will be replenished.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah.
Well, all of this, and it's December 2020,
Right.
as we're reenacting everything. So next week we will look at the impact of the pandemic on Anthony's business coming through this past spring 2021 into summer 2021. And we'll then actually explore Anthony's other business ventures and see how that comes into play with decisions that he makes with the restaurant business. So fascinating, without meaning to downplay how horrible
Yes.
it was. I mean, for those of us to hear the play, it's just mind-boggling.
Yes.
And particularly for those of you who have been with us since the beginning, knowing the adversity that you have faced in your life from very early on till now, again, it almost defies credulity that's going to be happening. But please do stay with us. There's much more to come, and Anthony will continue to give us a sense of what it was like personally for him as things started to shift. So thank you,
Thank you.
Anthony.
Thank you.
Thank you for being with us.